What happens when the shining promise of civilization conceals a living nightmare? In the heart of the 1893 World's Fair, a celebration of human progress and innovation, a monster walked unnoticed. As the city glowed with electric lights and marvels of modernity, something unspeakable was being built just a few miles away. A place where visitors checked in but never checked out. This isn't fiction. It's the true story of how safety became illusion and how H. Holmes turned the dreams of a new century into a silent slaughter. Beneath the polished veneer of this Gilded Age metropolis stood a structure that would become infamous not for what it revealed, but for what it concealed. On 63rd Street, a man named H. Holmes built a castle, not of stone or myth, but of gas chambers, false walls, hidden chutes, and a furnace meant not for warmth, but for erasure. In the age of progress, he built a machine of disappearance. Born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861, Holmes was a man of self-invention, a trait as American as the frontier and as deadly as unchecked ambition. He was intelligent, handsome, well-spoken, and entirely devoid of conscience. One young woman, a typist named Emmeline Cigrand, met Holmes after being promised employment at his hotel. Her friends later described how enchanted she had been by his poise and intellect, until one day she vanished without a trace. The last anyone saw of her, she was climbing the stairs of the murder castle, a trusting smile on her face. By the time Holmes arrived in Chicago and donned the name Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, he had already begun practicing two dark arts, swindling and seduction. He understood the theater of trust. His victims did not scream at the sight of him. They smiled. Holmes was not a madman in the Gothic sense. He was disturbingly sane, meticulously rational, and deeply modern. Think of the common scam artist, someone who exploits trust to siphon away money, reputation, or opportunity. Now, imagine that same manipulator not content with profit alone, but seeking ultimate control through death. Holmes took the logic of the con and amplified it to its most terrifying extreme, not just tricking people out of their belongings, but out of their lives. He navigated a world that worshipped credentials and upward mobility, and he mastered both. He sold life insurance policies to the same people he planned to kill. He married multiple women simultaneously. He told bold lies with an ease that suggested not delusion, but detachment. The real horror wasn't that Holmes killed. It was that he convinced so many people not to question him. In a district thriving on fair-related commerce, Holmes erected what he called the World's Fair Hotel. A name as innocuous as its true purpose was monstrous. The building, later dubbed the Murder Castle by a horrified press, was a testament to psychological manipulation made concrete, where design itself was used to deceive, trap, and control. Its construction began in 1887 and spanned several years, with Holmes frequently hiring and firing different contractors to keep anyone from understanding the full layout. The final result was a maze of confusion and concealment, stairways that led to nowhere, soundproof rooms with gas jets piped from Holmes's office, and a chute that delivered corpses directly into the cellar. Even more disturbing was the use of specially rigged rooms connected to Holmes's office, where he could observe or listen through hidden peepholes, suggesting not only a desire to kill, but to control and witness his victims' final moments. That basement, more laboratory than grave, was equipped for dissection, cremation, and destruction. If Holmes sought more than wealth, and his meticulousness suggests he did, it was the godlike power of removal, to vanish a person not just from life, but from memory. This was murder by design, murder as architecture. Holmes preyed on vulnerability. Julia Connor thought she'd found stability working at Holmes's pharmacy, especially with her young daughter Pearl in tow. But when she became romantically involved with him, the risk deepened. One Christmas, both Julia and Pearl vanished. Holmes casually told others they'd gone to visit relatives. Their burned remains were later suspected to have been among the ashes found in his basement furnace. Then there was Minnie Williams, a bright, educated woman who had inherited property in Texas. Holmes wooed her, convinced her to transfer her inheritance to one of his aliases, and invited her sister Nanny to Chicago. The sisters were last seen alive entering the castle. Holmes later used Minnie's identity to conduct financial transactions, as if she had never disappeared. These were not just names in a ledger, they were women with families, hopes, and plans, drawn into a web from which they never escaped. What is most chilling is not simply the body count, though estimates ranged from 9 to over 200, but the systematic erasure. Holmes not only killed, he covered, deceived, and outpaced inquiry. His genius lay in exploiting a society where people disappeared daily into the anonymity of urban sprawl, where population density and social mobility obscure individual identities, making it easier for predators to act unnoticed. Imagine the anonymity of modern cities, where even today, people vanish without a trace in bustling crowds. Now place that in the 1890s. No centralized ID systems, no fingerprint databases, no interagency communication. Holmes operated in a loophole of history, a gap in the evolving legal and identification systems of the time, which criminals could exploit without fear of detection, much like a virus in a system with no immune response. He wasn't just exploiting individuals, he was exploiting an entire societal infrastructure still catching up to its own complexity. In many cases, their fates were discovered only through forensic scraps. A burned femur here, a charred hairpin there. The evidence did not cry out. It whispered. Holmes's undoing came not through murder, but through fraud. For years, he had slipped through the cracks of a fragmented legal system, changing names, cities, and stories with uncanny ease. But in attempting to defraud an insurance company with the staged death of his associate Benjamin Pittersell, Holmes made a rare misstep, one that involved not just an adult conspirator, but 3 innocent children. It was only the relentless pursuit of Detective Frank Geyer, a member of the Philadelphia police force, that brought truth to light. Geyer meticulously traced Holmes's trail through a stack of receipts, hotel registries, and eyewitness testimonies. At one point, he found a trunk in a Toronto cellar that had been nailed shut, with the bodies of Alice and Nellie Pittersell hidden inside. Geyer's commitment turned what could have been another unsolved mystery into a landmark investigation in American criminal history. The moral universe shifted. Holmes was no longer a regional curiosity. He was a national monstrosity. The manhunt, the trial, and the confession were spectacles that marked the end of an era. The American public, so recently intoxicated by the marvels of industry and urbanization, was now forced to confront the dark passenger, the killer who thrived in crowds, who manipulated bureaucracy, who weaponized charm. Awaiting execution, Holmes penned a confession for a fee. This confession, printed in the Hearst-owned Philadelphia Inquirer, was marketed not as a sober legal statement, but as a sensationalized public spectacle. It was filled with lurid tales, dramatic embellishments, and fabrications, likely crafted to ensure both maximum readership and Holmes's posthumous infamy. This deliberate shaping of his legacy echoes the emerging age of mass media, where truth could be obscured by spectacle and infamy could outlast justice. At his hanging in 1896, Holmes remained unrepentant, calm to the end. The execution took place at Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia. The drop from the gallows failed to break his neck, and he strangled slowly for about 15 to 20 minutes, his body twitching, his face contorted. It was a grotesque mirror of the slow, calculated deaths he had orchestrated. At his request, his coffin was encased in cement and buried 10 feet deep. He feared grave robbers might exhume his corpse, an irony lost on no one. considering his own history with selling cadavers to medical schools. What then is the true legacy of H. Holmes? In a city that had crowned itself a beacon of modernity, he built its mirror image, a place where innovation served not enlightenment, but elimination. While the White City dazzled the world with grandeur and promise, Holmes constructed a parallel structure of darkness and deceit. His legacy is the haunting reminder that even in an age of light, shadows thrive. The same forces that made Chicago a marvel, the anonymity of the crowd, the speed of progress, the worship of success, also gave rise to its most infamous predator. Holmes did not simply kill, he rewrote the script of what evil could look like in the modern world. He was not an aberration, he was a byproduct, and that truth cuts deeper than any blade. Holmes belonged to the dawning age of systems, telegraphs, railroads, insurance networks, national newspapers. But he used these systems not to build, but to erase. And therein lies the philosophical irony. While Chicago built the White City to celebrate human advancement, Holmes built its shadow, the murder castle, to exploit human vulnerability. He was not a relic of the past. He was the beginning of something new, the modern predator. And perhaps that is the most frightening truth of all. In the end, we are not haunted by Holmes because of the bodies he buried. We are haunted because we know he could still exist among us today,